I'm an alcoholic. My name is Steve Russell.
Hey, Steve.
It's a pleasure to be here. My sobriety date is January 10th, 1990. My home group is the Keystone Group in Ashville, North Carolina. But I will say my first 26 years of sobriety I spent in Durham, and my home group was the Happy Destiny Group. I've seen a lot of those people here. And so I really grew up in AA in this area. So I won't give you away my age, but I was born in 1951. and in Salisbury, North Carolina. And I didn't really, my family, there was a lot of alcoholism in my family, looking back on it. Although there was not a lot of attention paid to it that I remember. My mother was an alcoholic, sporadic, she was a sporadic drinker. And when she died, she was sober in AA. Her father, my grandfather, Gaddy, he died, he was drunk when he died. And a week before he died, he got busted in a raid on a steal in Stanley County. And his father, Papa Joe, was also an alcoholic. I'd known that for a while. And he died drunk, but to be fair to Papa Joe, he was 93 when he died. There's always that one guy, that lasts all those years, and that's what he did. And I have two sons, two biological sons. I have two stepchildren. I have 4 grandchildren. Two of my biological sons both have issues with alcohol and one of my sons got sober 2.5 years ago in Ashville, and he's doing just great. So when people talk about how important it is for AA to be around, I really understand that. So I'll fast forward through high school. I had a normal life really growing up. I didn't drink until I was 18, and I played football and basketball. I had great grades. I was in the band, had friends, but I always had this feeling of unease looking back on it that I didn't really identify until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I now know it was fear, self-centered fear. So I had my first drink. In 1969, my plan, I was going to go to pharmacy school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I showed up there in 1969, and there are probably a few of you in the room that are old enough to remember, it was a pretty wide open place in 1969. There wasn't much you couldn't do. And I had my first drink at a dorm social, and this again tells you how the times have changed. The university actually paid for the party, and it was PJ, and I drank. I had a few of those, and I stood up, and all of a sudden it hit me. Life was just wonderful, and that's just the way I went. I won't bore you with all my years between then and when I got sober, except to say I did all the things. I had wrecks. I had two DUIs. Had a lot of problems with relationships in my life. And when I got here, I was 39 years of age. And the night before I came to AA, I realized I had to do something. My wife had actually been in AA, and I was in Al-Anon for a while. So I knew what AA was. And so I was walking one night. It was clear we were going to get divorced. It was clear I was going to be a single parent, mostly. And I was scared to death, and I looked up and said, God help me. And the next night I went to an AA meeting. Now, ironically enough, I'm pretty sure Archie was at that meeting, because it was the Tar Heel Group speaker meeting on Saturday night, Chapel Hill. And at that meeting, a gentleman came up and introduced himself to me. He said, I'm Kim. And he invited me to his new home group in Durham, which had split off from the Tar Heel Group. And he invited me there and told me when the first meeting was. And so I went. And it was a small meeting. And it was the first January in it was the first Tuesday in January, and they were having a meeting on the first step. Now, I thought they were having that for me. That's just how self-centered I am. I thought, well, that's awful nice, these people. And so afterwards, Kim comes up to me and he said, I'm going to be your sponsor. I'm glad he did that. I would have delayed it, I'm sure. I would have waited till I thought I could find somebody that I could jerk around. I mean, that's just the way I was. Manipulate. And so he and I had breakfast the next morning. And I look back on this, and he really laid out essentially what I needed to know from the very beginning. He didn't tell me what to do. He never told me what to do. He said, here's what I do. He said, I pray in the morning. I pray at night. I have a home group. I have a sponsor. I've worked through the steps. And a number of other things. And then he said, and when you're asked to do something in AA, you should always say yes, unless there's a good reason not to, and there's usually not a good reason not to. So I filed that away, and then I just started kind of doing what Tim suggested, Kim suggested I do. And very gentle man, just what I needed, but very direct. He told me from the very beginning, he said, my job's not to be your friend, my job's to tell you the truth. And he had a nice way of doing that. I was talking to him one night going over my life's problems. And he said, Steve, he said, I'm sorry. He said, this is all very interesting, but I've got some stuff I need to do. He said, why don't we hang up and you write down 10 things you're grateful for and call me back in an hour. Now, being an arrogant, self-centered alcoholic, my thought was, now I have hired this man to be my sponsor. And I don't like this, but I did it. There were a number of times when he would do things like that, and I would only figure out later the truth that he had told me. And it was always in just the right way. I've been very lucky I've had great sponsors over the years. Kim moved away, and he ultimately passed away. Jim T. from Durham, I believe, who's here, was a sponsor of mine for a number of years. And Bill A., who was in our group in Durham, who was very active in Alcoholics Anonymous service. He was my sponsor for a number of years. And I've always really benefited from that. And one of the biggest when I got here, I quickly lost the desire to drink, which was a miracle to me. But just as big a miracle as somehow I was desperate enough as I was willing to listen to others. I didn't know how to do that. I would never look you in the face and tell you I didn't care what you thought, because I knew that sounded arrogant. But I really didn't care what you thought. And my way was always the best way. So things happened, children, grandchildren. My wife and I decided that we would move to Ashville. And I moved up there about 6 years ago. And so I had been involved in general service in a very long time. I mean, I was a GSR and all that with my group early on. But I was a single parent and all that coming up through, when I was growing up through AA. And I didn't have a lot of time. But anyway, I moved to Asheville and I somehow got involved. And by the way, I really identify what somebody else said about how we didn't do it right down here as compared to New York. They didn't do it right in Asheville either as compared to where I was. But I only had one home group, so you know what I know. But I was roped in, and the way I was roped in was a guy got elected DCM of our district, and I happened to know him because I had been involved in a project with him that they asked me to help out with. And he calls me one day, and he asked me to stand for alternate DCM. And I can't tell you how much I did not want to do that. And for literally almost 10 minutes, I explained to him why it was impossible for me to do this. And that whole time, Kim's in the back of my head saying, don't turn it down. And after that long diatribe about how I couldn't do it, I said, okay, I'll do it. And it's been a wonderful experience. It got me exposed to folks in Asheville, other parts of the state. It's just been a real neat journey. I have a wonderful life today. I'm in pretty good health for a guy my age, and I have family that loves me. I have children that love me. I have grandchildren that I think love me. I know they do. And it's just been a wonderful journey. And so I'll just end by thanking you, people in AA and Alcoholics Anonymous in general. Thank you.